Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the UK, English language, released in the year 2018, directed by Matthew Holness, and this film is called Possum. So Possum is a psychologically damaging experience that follows the main character, who's a disgraced puppeteer. We don't know what happened in the past with his show, but it went horribly wrong. And so he's down on his confidence, and so he decides in order to try and build the confidence, he needs to get away from it all. So he goes to his childhood home that is owned by his uncle, who he grew up with, and this is where he's going to try and come to terms with who he is as a person. But that's going to be very difficult because he's had a lot of trauma in his past, and the trauma has something to do with the bag that he's holding. So whatever's inside the bag is starting to have a very negative effect on him, is because it's turning his life into a living nightmare. So as each day passes, his mental health is deteriorating, and it's starting to send him down a spiral where he passes the point of no return. And so if he is ever to get his life back on track, he's going to have to really try and discard of these contents in the bag, but it's proving to be very difficult. So whether or not he can is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Possum. This is an incredibly intriguing film on one side, but on the other side it's damaged a lot by monotony. Now monotony is the biggest killer to this film that I'll go through a little bit later, but there are phenomenal aspects that this movie has, and that's what makes the movie worth watching, is that you're not going to be impressed as an overall experience, but there's glimpses of the film that make this director very, very exciting. And the biggest positive to this film is the absorbing atmosphere that the director manages to create. This atmosphere is incredibly unnerving, it's incredibly dark, very disturbing, and I really like the way that these hallucinations of this main character are manifestations of his past. And so it gives you a glimpse into the inside of this main character's psyche, and there are questions that really beg answering. And that is ultimately what you need to create a very interesting horror film. But the monotony in the movie kind of goes against that interest, and that's something, as I said, I'll go into a little bit later, but at least it creates something at the start of the film. It creates a platform, and although it doesn't really jump off that platform, at least it creates an absorbing 10 to 15 minutes. And so atmospherically, as I said, it's brilliant. It's a movie that really made me feel on edge. It really made me feel uncomfortable. As I said, the manifestations that this guy's going through sends a chill down your spine and makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And so psychologically, as far as horror films are concerned, Matthew Holness really nails a lot of those key elements. And so it's complemented by a phenomenal performance from Sean Harris. Sean Harris is a very talented actor, and he showcases those talents in a man that is a very sympathetic human being, but on the other side a very dangerous human being. You're not quite sure what he's capable of, and that these manifestations that he's seeing is in symbolism into his past. And as you get a little bit more into his past, that's what creates the sympathy. But as I said, he's a product of his upbringing. So that upbringing, is he actually a dangerous human? And so it does create a lot of suspense within that main character that I thought contributed to that very unnerving quality that the film has. It's also further intensified through a phenomenal score. The score is a character of its own, and it combines with everything that the film has going for it, as I said, to create that very dark bubble. And that dark bubble is something that you don't get in a lot of horror films, and I think the director really understands what it is to create that invisible presence that has that stranglehold on you, and it's something that you don't really feel comfortable with, but as a horror fan you will really appreciate. And so that was good, and it does have a very shocking climax. But unfortunately, this is ultimately where I come into my problems in the film, is that it's getting to that climax that is the chore. This felt like a 10 to 15 minute film. It would have been a masterpiece as a short movie, but it's trying to justify itself and tell itself that it's a feature-length film, but it's not. And because it's not a feature-length film, I felt as though the movie was going over and over. It was using the same idea from start to finish. Now, for a film to work, you need levels of elevation, is that you become accustomed to one idea that the film has, and then it has to go into that next level to sustain that curiosity, to sustain that effect that prevents it from outstaying its welcome. But unfortunately, the director really can't do that, is that it's kind of filler from start to finish, and I felt as though it's outstayed its welcome. And for an 80-minute film, it's not a long run time, but when it feels like it goes for 2 hours, that's ultimately a problem. I kept looking at my watch, and by the time you get to that really shocking climax and revelation as to what the whole film was about, it doesn't hit you with the same impact, because it lets you kind of disconnect yourself from what's going on. And so the whole movie is this guy just walking around, he's seeing things, he's going through this hallucinatory nightmare. As I said, it's very, very uncomfortable, but the story just doesn't have enough power behind it to really justify this film for being as long as it is. And so the first 10 to 15 minutes, as I said, was absolutely fantastic. It sets a very solid platform, but unfortunately the movie just doesn't jump off that platform. The movie is just going to stay on the very same level, and it felt as though it was the first 10 to 15 minutes was being recycled over and over and over and over and over, and I just felt as though it was getting increasingly difficult to stay focused on what was going on. And so a really good atmosphere and really good production can only take you so far before you start to notice the shortcomings in the story, and unfortunately that is the biggest criticism to Possum, and it prevents it from being a very good movie. So overall, if you are a fan of atmospheric horror films, maybe you'll like this movie. As I said, the manifestations as to what's going on screen has a deeper meaning, so that was very good, but it just doesn't have the elevation in the story to actually snowball it. It doesn't have that snowball effect, so therefore it does outstay its welcome quite considerably, and by the time you get to the film's draw card, which is the ultimate revelation, as I said, it doesn't hit you with the impact because you're kind of glad that the experience is over. And so that was a very disappointing aspect to the film, but there's enough aspect in this movie that is very impressive, that actually indicates that Matthew Holness is a very talented director. I just don't think he executed all these ideas very well, therefore it's a movie that's not terrible, but then again it's not as good as it really could have been. So overall for Possum, going to give this one 2.5 stars. See it if there's nothing else to watch, but don't get your hopes up that you're going to get a movie that's going to blow you away. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.